into the sea, mountains into the sea.
Welcome to the Our State Book Club podcast. I'm your host, Wiley Cash. Today, we're in Charlotte's Eastover neighborhood, just a few miles from uptown. We're here to interview Judy Goldman, author of Together, a memoir of a marriage and a medical mishap. Judy is a beloved North Carolina novelist, poet, and memoirist. And today, we'll talk about how she uses writing to make sense of her life. I've known Judy for years, and she's one of my favorite writers working today. This will be a fun, illuminating conversation about transmuting one's life to the page. Come see Judy and me in conversation along with National Book Award-winning novelist Jason Mott at Fearington Village on the evening of March 20th. So, Judy, thank you for joining us and for welcoming us to your beautiful house.
I have to say thank you for asking me to do this. North Carolina is so lucky to have you because you take care of all of us.
Oh my gosh.
So thank you.
Don't tell my kids that. Because this morning our youngest was like, do you have time to play a game before you go? And I was like, absolutely not. I've got to go talk to Judy Goldman. Put your game away.
As it should be.
So you and your husband, Henry, y'all have lived in Charlotte for, you were just telling me, 57 years.
Yes.
But you raised your kids here, and now your two kids are back living nearby.
My daughter lives 10 minutes in one direction. My son lives 7 minutes in the other.
And you got your grown grandbabies in North Carolina as well. But you're a South Carolina girl at heart. So Can you tell me a little bit about growing up in Rock Hill and whatever early literary impulses you had in Rock Hill?
All of my early, middle, and late literary, anything having to do with that is because of growing up in Rock Hill. And I think a lot of people say this who grew up in small towns, but it's really nice to grow up in a town where what you do matters to so many different people, and you know it because they let you know it. I always think of my third grade teacher, Miss Hoke. I wrote my first poem for her. My Friend Joe was the title.
Did you have a friend named Joe?
No, I've never even known anybody named Joe, but Joe rhymes with a lot of things.
Oh, okay.
So that's why I picked Joe. But when I gave her the poem, you would think she was going to nominate me for a National Book Award.
Yeah.
That's the kind of encouragement that turns into a writer.
Were you active going to the library and things like that?
I loved our library. It's a beautiful old building. I could take out as many books as I wanted. Yes, I love. And I had access maybe to some books that maybe a young person normally wouldn't have access to. And I'm thinking about the book, Cheaper by the Dozen, which came out, I think, in the 1940s. I read that over and over. Yeah. What's it about? A family. Yeah. And that's my subject, family. Yeah. I also had access to Frank Yerby's books, which had sex scenes in them. And so those were passed around the neighborhood, but that was not through my parents.
Were your parents big readers? Were there books around in your house? What kind of stuff did they introduce you to?
So our den was wall-to-wall books, ceiling to floor, full wall of books. They both were big readers. And my father probably read a lot of biography and history and that sort of thing. And mother read novels.
Yeah. Along those lines, who were some of your early literary heroes? Because, you started off, were you writing, you were doing poetry first. You published as a poet first. And so My Friend Joe had long legs into your career. But who were some of your early literary heroes? Were you reading contemporary poetry when you were tinkering with becoming a poet? Like down in Rock Hill, who were you reading that was really leaving an impression on you?
Well, I think early influences in high school played a bigger part in poetry because I fell in love with Emily Dickinson.
Okay.
But because I was 16, 17, and 18, I didn't get all the layers that she was writing. But they were simple poems and I could understand them. And I used to practice, I would memorize Emily Dickinson poems and then practice saying them in what I pretended was a foreign language, because I was also sort of a ham, so I was always performing too. But yeah, Emily Dickinson was definitely, and Edgar Allan Poe, because it was startling what he wrote, scary.
I just read, it came out last year, it's a biography of Sylvia Plath.
I just read it.
Oh, you did?
I just read it. I was mesmerized.
So was I.
Wasn't it good?
And so many, and she loved Emily Dickinson, and you and Sylvia Plath, I think, would be about the same age, right? She might be a little bit older than you.
Yeah, I think she's older than I am.
But that confessional impulse in poetry kind of marked the 1960s with Robert Lowell, even Ted Hughes to a certain degree, Anne Sexton. Do you think you were part of that confessional impulse coming out of the 60s?
It gave me permission to write about myself, because if you're Southern, if you're a girl, you grow up hearing, don't talk about yourself. It's not okay. But they gave me permission to write about myself and to write very personal, intimate poems when I first started out. Yeah, they definitely did. And a lot of the things that Sylvia Plath did, I did, moving to New York as a single person.
Getting into advertising.
Exactly. Yeah. So a lot of that, I really felt even more of a connection to her.
Gosh, that's so interesting. We will be right back with Judy Goldman after a quick break. This podcast is produced by Our State Magazine, celebrating North Carolina travel, food, history, and culture since 1933. Check out ourstate.com, where you can explore exclusive content like digital stories, YouTube videos, newsletters, and more. To have each month's issue delivered to your mailbox, visit ourstate.com/subscribe and enter promo code BOOKCLUB, one word, Book Club. That's BOOKCLUB for $5 off any regular or gift subscription. We are back with Judy Goldman. So, Judy, I want to ask you, we're going to talk about your memoir together in the next episode. That is the February selection of the Our State Book Club. And that's about your relationship with your husband, Henry, and a medical mishap and the story of your marriage. But for now, I want to ask you, what was it like when Henry, who comes across as this very practical, he's an optometrist, what was it like for Henry to learn that his newly beloved wanted to be a writer? What was that? Because I remember the first night my wife, Mallory, and I met, I was in graduate school, and she said, "What are you studying?" And I said, "Creative writing." And the look on her face was, she was repulsed.
So I was already a writer when I met Henry.
Okay.
I was living in New York. I graduated from college. I had taught high school English in Atlanta, moved to New York, wanted to get a glamour job in New York. So first I worked for a film company, but nobody there ever learned any woman's name. You were always hun and sugar and sweetheart, and I didn't like that.
Yeah. But
I liked the advertising people who came to film, so I became an advertising copywriter in New York. So I was already a writer. It was amazing to me because I was getting paid for something I had always done. I had always written, the neighborhood newspaper, the neighborhood plays, my books that I made, my life as a movie star, my life as a tap dancer, my life as a mother, my life as a wife. I mean, I was a memoirist when I was 9.
Yeah.
So I was already writing when I met him. But the tricky part was, then we got married. I sort of talked him into marrying me. And because he had $90 in his checking account, that was his argument. That was his obstacle to. So I said, I can support us, coming from New York to Charlotte.
Full disclosure, y'all known each other about a month, right?
Right. We had 3. Well, we got engaged on our 3rd day. Yeah. Wow. Full disclosure. Yes. So, but I said to him, coming from a New York agency to Charlotte, I'll get a job. I'll make money. I can support us. So I did support us for a long time. And then as his practice grew, I still contributed to the family earnings a lot. And then all of a sudden, one day I said, I've had it. I'm done. I want to write poetry. So I closed a freelance business that I had. Jan Karen and I were the only freelance ad copywriters in Charlotte. So we had all the business we wanted.
That's amazing.
Yeah, we were really good friends then through advertising. Anyway, I stopped copywriting and I started writing poetry. Well, my whole family thought I was nuts. Nuts, you know. And I remember my father saying, can you make a living writing poetry? You know, and I thought, well, maybe not. Maybe so. I don't know.
What was Henry's response?
Everybody should be married to Henry.
Yeah.
Really and truly. He was so supportive of me because he knew what I wanted to do and what I hated doing. And he was just very supportive. He pushed me. He pushed me to the first open mic reading I went to. And I read such a bad poem, but I did it. I did it. And it said to me, I'm a poet. I'm going to write poetry. That's going to be my identity now. That's going to be who I am. And he really pushed it. He didn't just support it. He really propelled me into it.
Circle back, Mallory's been the same. I remember after I got my first book contract, I said, you know, I want to stop teaching and I think I want to write full time. And she was practicing law. And she said, you know, it's always been your dream to write novels. It's never been your dream to teach 4 classes a semester at a liberal arts college. That's never been your dream. So that's what you should do. And so she was very supportive.
We are lucky.
Very lucky.
And we're probably in the 5%.
Yeah, I would say. Well, you know, you said before that writing about Henry was part of your marriage contract. So how was that discussed when you began?
It wasn't discussed. And really, I just did it and made it part of our marriage contract. And then it was part of my contract with my children that they would be in my books. And then, oh my gosh, bless their hearts, my son-in-law and daughter-in-law did not marry these people to be written about in their mother-in-law's books, right? But they are. They're there. But I always show everybody my manuscripts before they're published, and they have full veto power, but they have never vetoed a thing. Not one person. I don't think they read carefully. You know, I mean, I'm kidding, but, you know, surely there's some of those things. In Together, I know we're not talking about that yet, but my editor said what I needed to add to the book was writing about my children's marriages. That if I was going to write about my marriage, I needed to write about my children's marriages. Now, can you imagine that when your girls marry and you write about their marriages in a book? You know, but my kids were okay with it, amazingly.
Well, what you do so beautifully, and I know we're getting ahead of ourselves, but what you do so beautifully in writing about their marriages in relation to yours is you'd make connections between the little sacrifices or the little bumps in the road, and they line up side by side, and it shows this kind of in the similarity. There's like fellowship, for lack of a better word, in the similarity.
That's an
nothing
interesting thing.
It's the things that feel very distinct or very universal, and I think there's peace in that. I would imagine, especially for children.
And also part of that, I'll say this: part of writing memoir. And I tell students this in my workshops, you have to make yourself look twice as bad as everybody else. And I think maybe that was part of writing about all of our marriages, that I'm not just going to say we had this glorious marriage. Now tell me your problems. You know, I mean, I'm not going to do that.
So you've got a new memoir coming out in May, and it is titled The Rest of Our Lives. And the main argument, the main thrust of the memoir is that our life's decisions never get easier. The path never grows clearer, and there is just as much uncertainty and joy at 80 as there is at 16. Can you tell us a little bit about the genesis for your new book? Again, it comes out in May, but I want people to be ready for it.
That's a really good synopsis of my premise in the book. So the memoir before that memoir was on its way to publication. And usually I have an idea for a new memoir at that point. I may not be working on it because I'm sort of a minimalist and a single focused person. So it's hard for me to be writing a book when I'm having previous book coming out. But usually I have an idea. I had no idea.
Was that a weird feeling?
It was a terrible feeling because if I'm not writing, I'm not a nice person to be around. I mean, you don't want to be around me if I'm not writing. And it was
Does something just feel undone? Or
very
just
unbalanced, not okayness. And so I kept asking different people, so I said to my daughter, Laurie, I don't have an idea for a new book. And she said, well, your grandchildren, I said, I've written about everybody in my family. I don't have a big enough family. I'm out of family.
Yeah.
And she said, well, your grandchildren mean a lot to you. What about writing about them? I said, no, that will be cheesy, too sentimental, too sweet. No. As to writer friends of mine, how do you get started with a new book? I forgot.
Yeah.
And they said, well, keep a notebook. I said, well, of course. That's how I start every book. I know that. I'd forgotten everything I ever knew.
Yeah.
So I started keeping a notebook and I wrote down grandchildren, ? And then I started just writing down specific memories. When I lived in New York, the Barbizon Hotel for Women, different things that I had experienced. And then I wrote something about aging.
Mm-hmm.
And I tell writing students, you have to write about what keeps you up at night.
Yeah.
I'm 83. I think a lot about aging. All my friends are this old. So I thought if I tell my students to write about what keeps them up at night, I need to take my own advice.
Yeah.
And so I started working on the book about aging.
That teaching, it does kind of keep you honest when you're giving students advice and you think, I should do that.
Mm-hmm.
Or, I should put myself in that uncomfortable position. So I want to ask you, you've lived in Charlotte for 57 years. What is your earliest or your strongest Charlotte memory from moving to the city?
It may be my sweetest memory too. It's my mother, my older sister, and I in our Oldsmobile, two-tone green Oldsmobile, driving from Rock Hill through Fort Mill, Pineville to Charlotte to shop at Ivy's.
Oh, yeah.
And my mother wore a hat. For this occasion, it was a time when the three of us did something together, walking up and down Tryon Street from store to store. It was just a very special time. Crossing the Catawba River.
Oh, yeah.
Between Rock Hill and Charlotte, one of us would say the river's high today, or somebody would say the river's low today. That was standard.
Yeah.
And sweet.
Yeah, I grew up in Gastonia, and my earliest memory of knowing that Charlotte was a place, in the middle of the night, my dad sometimes would get us out of bed, and we would go to the old Krispy Kreme on Wilkinson and get hot and now donuts, and then go to the little turnaround at the airport, which you used to be able to go to, and sit on the hood and watch the planes and eat donuts. And it's such a clear memory of the vastness of Charlotte, this big urban space.
Yes.
When you think of a dish that reminds you of growing up, what do you think of?
Can I name two?
Sure.
Fried chicken and biscuits.
Yeah.
Of course. I just made biscuits yesterday, in fact. Yeah, I still make them.
Is it fried chicken the way your mother would make it, or was there a restaurant?
Well, my book called Child was about Maddie Culp, the black woman who lived with my family, so it was Maddie's Biscuits. Yeah, my mother did not know how to cook. Yeah. She worked, and she didn't cook.
Yeah. Well, Judy, thank you so much. This has been so fun. And in the next episode, we are going to talk about Together, which is the pick for the February book club. So we'll see you then.
Thank you.
What might it be like underneath the sunrise in a state of flight? Coming back on me, it seems wonderful, the wandering mountain birds on a beach. Never moments ever wasted, turning away from your love. Honeybees, gardens of sweeter fruit, never tasted, no turning to other things. Will you be will you see? Sweeter fruit never tasted. Don't turn your back on me. Mountains pushing into the sea. Mountains into